well, you can see the Carrington Hotel. We're going to end up at that hotel in the distance. We're going to end up there at the end of our trip, so in about 4 or 5 hours. It's a lovely period hotel, like with a Victorian Royal Society pool hall or Explorers Guild, wood panelled. Yes. So it's perfect as a place of ending up. But what I was going to say was, I'll check the chat again soon too. What I was going to say was, it's important to remember, because not a lot of people talk about this, because I was watching a monastic yesterday, but it's really important because the thoughts that come to you, say a lot of people, the first thing people struggle with is when they're, pornography, right? Getting rid of that and stopping that completely and stopping all self-gratification of the reproductive organs. And so the monastic talked about blocking the thought immediately at its root with the Jesus prayer or with prostrations or anything that would interrupt it. I think what's key though, which we do in our practice, those things of course as well, constant prayer. What I advise and what you should be doing this in the morning with your concentration practice. The moment any thought arises of its own accord, while you're praying the Jesus prayer, while you're doing the concentration without effort at the same time, is to do the neutral no. Just a gentle neutral no and return to what you're doing. And what happens with that is it does what he's talking about, because you're also blocking it, let's say, as he says, the Orthodox monk, you're also blocking it with prayer, but also the moment it appears. And what happens, and as some people will attest to in our, people will attest to in our fellowship, is that you almost notice the thought before it even, eventually, you notice it's bad. It also helps with discernment, but you almost know something, not know as in K-N-O-W, N-O, I mean, you almost know it, like by saying no in your mind. You almost say no in your mind before it even articulates. Richard, a great friend of the fellowship and project, said that to me as well, and I noticed the same thing, and others as well. So, or others will have noticed the same thing. And so it's so important to be doing that practice, right? And of course, because for an hour in the morning, you are practicing. It's also a kind of discernment, because you sort of you know everything. You say no to everything to begin with, because there's no reason to be philosophizing, even good thoughts, because the devil will often even use useful thoughts to try get you to respond while you're in your meditative contemplations. And so that even still gets me sometimes. Oh, this is a great idea. I must do this. I must teach the fellowship. You know what I mean? It's like, it gets you on those facts, on those details that are towards your goals. Even could be biblical, right? To disturb there is no reason in the time of your prayers or as you're moving towards silence in your concentration in the morning, there's just no reason to respond or think about anything like that. So you just immediately know anything. You say no to anything, that is. Again, gently, neutrally, and returning to prayer. I don't think we can walk down that way. I just wanted to see what that person's back garden was like. Maybe we will just have a look. So we're in someone's private driveway. Might as well have a look. No, maybe not. Better not. Better not. And so because I see a lot of people talk about this, that people ask advice of unknown figures like Matt Fradd or the Catholic podcaster or even monastics, is that knowing that saying no, that not saying that, just a gentle thinking no, is a added way. It really has great aid in interrupting that thought process, because again, like I said, what the devil's trying to do, what the hierarchies of the left and your lower animal nature are trying to do, is get you to engage. And so that's also why they also try this with, because the thought will come to you and it'll be a sort of sinful thought, right? A thought will come to you and it'll be a sinful thought. And so you'll worry immediately, oh, have I sinned in that thought coming? And as we know, you don't want to get muffled up in this stuff. You haven't invested your heart in it, but you can always, because what I do daily as well, is after my morning practice, which for me goes for an hour and a half, an hour is a good time for the practice for everyone, but I confess every morning. And so just leave it for that. You don't need to engage, because they try to, the lower hierarchies try to get you engaged in that way too. And so it's sufficient just to know that, just to know it as fast as possible. Or if you forget, you might forget, and you might engage with it. Say it's a will to power thing, say it's a social media thing, say it's a negative comment by someone and you react. Now fuck that guy, that sort of lower nature comes out. Fuck that person. You just know it. So you just have a know and do the Jesus prayer. And of course, when it's coming to overcoming these sort of lower nature elements of, where are we going again? These lower, I remember. These lower nature things, of course, as we've talked about before, with that whole knowing, you're just doing it repeatedly, right? Say it's an urge to the reproductive organs. Bring your attention after that to the diaphragm, to the breath and Jesus prayer. And so you're knowing, and if it comes up again, you just know again, bring it back to the Jesus prayer, know again, bring it back to the Jesus prayer, know again, bring it back to the Jesus prayer. Completely neutrally. Don't let even some thought or whatever, don't let the lower nature or the hierarchies of the left, don't let them make you reactive. And this is one thing about that, this Unseen Warfare, amazing book. There is one thing though to be wary of, is the metaphor of war. Because if you, again, like we just said, the devil's trying to get you to react. In the reaction of, say something appears to you, or again, it's like a sinful thought or something. If you're sort of struggling not to sin, like, like if you just have that attitude, that is a reaction as well. And so that can make you frustrated and disturbs the peace of the heart. So you're always trying to restore that. And the metaphor of war is not so helpful for that. So when you're reading that book, which is super important that people do, it's important just to keep that in mind. And to understand what we're doing is we're leading the lower nature to a better way. We're leading them to the Lord, which is love, not hate. It's not the will to power, it's the will to service of Jesus. And so, which way will we walk? Anyway, I'll let you guys, maybe you can look at the front for a bit as we continue on here. And we're going to walk to a beautiful amphitheatre park, which is sort of designed like an amphitheatre anyway. It's got a natural amphitheatre and all a multi-leveled sort of thing they built in probably Victorian times, I think. But that's what we're going to do. Anyway, I'm just going to check the chat. Where's my phone going? Oh, good. Thought I dropped it or something. That would have been a fucking disaster. Hypersexuality. Oh, cool. Good, some things to read. I pray during the offertory of prayers for the people parts. Neutral no between prayer. If you're in the depths of concentration without effort in prayer, yes. If a thought interrupts your prayer, gentle, neutral, no in the mind. People need children to be happy and they will be at war with themselves. It's completely unnatural. Hypersexuality is prevalent among childless people as well. The issue of sexual degeneracy is mental illness. Yeah, that's true. But that's the point. It's a spiritual disease. It's not just a matter of biology. But it's very simply overcome, man. It's just by doing what I just said. And that's both, right? You have people that are, what do we call them? people that do same-sex stuff. It's all sodomy. And so you can overcome it. But those little things that we just mentioned are ways that aren't talked about. The knowing thing is a part of it, but also, because they say of course you pray to Jesus to help you overcome it. You must do that, and the Jesus prayer, but also attending the breath and letting the automatic breath determine the speed of the Jesus prayer. Because of course, if your concentration moves to a different area of the body, anytime a sensation even appears in the reproductive organs, just move it to the diaphragm, Jesus prayer. That's how it's overcome completely. Also, of course, there's eye lust, looking at women that flirt with you and various things, but yeah. Hi friends, can't wait to see the amphitheatre. Yeah, I hope you like it. And then we're going to go down to the cliff edges for you guys to have a look at that. But this is a great trip. I've had this trip many times. It used to be, Katoomba used to be a holiday spot. You can see some Harley Davidson bicycles here walking past some pubs. But Katoomba used to be a holiday spot. But also there was a lot of coal mining done down in the valley, because we're at the top of the mountain here. Top of the, what would you call it, a plateau, whatever. Maybe we should cross there actually. No, it'll be right here. Okay. That's interesting. Antiques. Get to church, friends. Get to prayer. Get to contemplation. That's what we like to see. There was a funny comment. It's last week or 2 weeks ago when we did this last time, someone said it's street esotericism based. But yeah, so these things can be overcome. There is another thing as well though that we're planning at the moment. We're planning and we're working on a really important lecture, which is about the discernment, which is about how to actually discern divine will. It's almost what this whole process and all these lectures have been leading towards, is this, because it's an intermediate and advanced practice, so get started on the concentration without effort, which is listed in my lectures under mysticism. Practices of mysticism start now. Get started on that concentration without effort, because it's not something it's something that's earned. And so there's a lecture I'm preparing on that, but it's of course something you don't want to get wrong, because fundamentally spiritual deception is a danger, and you have to learn how to discern, because you can always be misled in this process, right? And we're very careful with that. So that's what the epistemic principle is for, as we've talked about before. And so we're very careful. And we always mention that because it's bound to be a criticism that comes up in the future. But the point is, it can be discerned. And it's all about that, is that the Lord has wanted us to... well, we're going to be coming back to this area later, but it's worth having a look at. And then we'll turn around. What was I saying? I guess the Lord wants us to draw closer to Him, to be able to. But of course we have to do the withdrawal. Here's the Carrington Hotel that we're going to return to later. But we'll just turn around here. Of course He wants that. He wants us to. But we have to withdraw and purify the spirit, as we talked about in the Beatitudes lecture last week. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You have to dissolve everything first. And that's the same with beauty and joy. A lot of people seek joy rather than truth. And it has to be truth, and the joy comes after it. Because if you just seek joy, as I've talked about before, spiritual deception is around the corner. You end up in the realm of lies if you're just looking to feel better. And so, yeah, that's important. Here we go, we're coming up on the park now. As you can see, I'm going to take it out of its stand. But what were we saying? The lecture that we're working on. And so there is a way of course, of being able to discern these things. And it's about the key difference in joy. Again, I probably shouldn't, don't follow anything I'm saying until I've actually done the lecture, because it has to go through the full epistemic principle, meaning criterion for truth. I don't want to present something before, but there's two different types of joy. It's the mystery of joy. Well, there are actually more than two different types, but what is it fundamentally? Well, we're talking about ask the Lord. Of course, we have to go through this long purification. Here we are. This is the amphitheatre, by the way, that we're coming into. I guess we could have a look at the plaque before we go down into it. But this park was officially opened by the Honourable L.O. Martin, MLA, Minister for Works, the local government, 1st of January 1940. Just before the war, this tablet was unveiled by His Excellency the Governor of New South Wales, and March 19 for death MC in Paul tribute. It's called Oxford Smith Memorial Park. My gun, I'm seeking my guns. Oh wait, that's the wrong character in Gandalf voice. Okay, so here it is. And so you've got this decline. And the dry stone wall around it all. I don't know. It obviously requires a lot of maintenance to keep going, but it's very pretty. And as we see very rarely in this country now, this is a great shame because of the anti-Europeanness that's developing, just like it is everywhere in the colonies, the colonies. Good movie that, The Madness of King George. As we see a greater developing hate for European things, and so you see that in the obsession with native plants and trees, and no longer making European gardens or dry stone walls for this sort of thing. And even just think about that name we just read out, Lord Wakehurst, Sir Charles Kingsford Smith. They tried to get rid of these things, try to remove the old country's ways of knights and dames, and I think someone restored it, but he was a shitlib. Doesn't matter, there is no traditionalist party in this country, unfortunately. Well, there is nowhere really. You look at it, countries like Romania, they just pass, or they're passing laws where anti-gay, not being able to talk about Jays, right? They passed laws recently about that. And this is with the based Hungarian Prime Minister, you know, so don't know about that. And so here we go, having a look at this first, and then we'll make our way down to the cliffs. But what was I saying? Yes, there is what we are looking for in this whole process as we delve towards the depths. Might need to go to the bathroom at some stage too. There's a trolley here, what's that doing there? Homeless. Yes, well, in former times, such things wouldn't be allowed, right? For this shit just to be left around. We'd sort them out. You'd have Bobby on the beat with his big helmet, but now you've just got 3 foot tall women and black, well, I better not say that. 3 foot tall women in the police force, but you know, we used to have Bobby on the beat who was 7 foot tall with his big hat, and it made him look even taller. But yeah, wow, look at this. Here it is, man. Can you see it? And at the top of that hill, I think That used to be a hotel from Edwardian Victorian times, or at least Art Deco times. Up the top, that's beautiful, isn't it? And so I guess the audience would sit there, and if they'd have shows on, but it's almost a natural amphitheatre, which is quite interesting. And you've got the European trees down here. I wonder if the signal's still good down here. Probably. I upgraded to the best carrier in this country, which is called Telstra. It used to be a government. Wow, look at that. Pretty beautiful. It is. Yeah, we like that. I'll check the chat as we walk in. Yeah, what a strange contrast. Look at that rich green and the falling leaves of the because in this country most plants are evergreen, and so you see that it's a bit more, well, people plant European trees still, but to see the barren trees like that, most of this country does not look like that at all. But yeah, there's a small amphitheatre there. Some dude sitting there though, homeless chap, I think. So I won't point it in that direction, but it's very pretty. All right. We'll get back to what I was saying in a second. Let's have a look at this. Have I thought of streaming on Rumble? This is live on Rumble right now. It's live on YouTube. It's live on my secondary YouTube. It's live on. It's live on a bunch of platforms. This is a multi-stream. New technology. Yeah. All right. Let's continue on. I don't know what the best way is to get back up there, or should we just walk back up the way we came? Okay. I think we're gonna... Let's walk back up the way we came, I think. Get a sense of what that looks like as well. Sometimes we'll go silent on this. Sometimes we'll go silent on this stream, because it is a long period of time. People can drink in the environment anyway. Well, old mate's making some noise. Bless him. Pray for him. Pray for him, guys. Yeah. The old demons, the old insanity. God bless him. Oh, Jesus bless him. Amen. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but you know, there's a lot of tortured people around. We live in a very broken world. It's bad everywhere, even though economic conditions might be all right. The savagery of the industrialization of modernity has ruthlessly destroyed many people's lives, and we know this from bless him, Lord. We know this from schizophrenia. Didn't exist before the modern age. There was no such thing. So it's something that came about after that. Carl Jung talks about that. And gosh, that was almost a performed laugh that evolved into from the homeless chap that was sitting in the amphitheatre, that evolved into well, I don't know if he's homeless. He just looks a bit, you know, when people, you get a sense from people. And it transformed into a gasp almost, which is very sad. And when people reach a certain amount of instability and mental instability, there's just no resources. Also, well, resources of course help, and we should always pay our debts. And a way of paying our debts is donating to charity. No, not charity, sorry, directly giving money to the poor. Because charities, you know, they pay wages. and they're not so much a good thing. But directly giving to the poor, because you've got to pay your debts. And in this process, you have to pay your debts. In the process of initiation, for the right to go further. Because conscience is a reality, my friends. The ground of reality is moral. And you discover that in the death process, in the concentration without effort with prayer, doing that for an hour a day, in withdrawing. You slowly delve into the depths of the psyche, with always collaboratively, always with the Lord's help. You discover that in the mystical process. That's what happened with me anyway. And so, conscience, that's what you do. That's why you paid. One way of that is giving to the poor. One way is simply blessing the people you walk past. That's a great way, because at first, when you start this process, you might be a lot on your own, right? Because it is a kind of monastic. It's for people that are a bit monastic. And you might, interacting with people, it's not about atonement. You can ask, part of it is blessing others, forgiving others, blessing someone, or asking the Lord to forgive to them, to forward give to them before, of course, is the new covenant. But you can pay your debts that way too, just by blessing people. It also has to be about helping people though, as well. If it's just for you and your spiritual curiosities, the Lord's not going to show himself to you because you're curious. Because he doesn't suffer experiments. That's what the temptation of the Christ is about, when he doesn't suffer casting yourself off the pinnacle of the temple. Doesn't suffer that. It's about, it can happen for you through the will though. You can will it to be. And so we don't accept pragmatists in the sense of people that are just trying to use the truth or the procedures or the ways of our way of being. Because you've got a lot of these pragmatists entering the church, right? If they keep that pose, they keep themselves in superiority over with their own will to power, thinking, I'll just use this for family stability, I'll just use this. And sometimes those people can be converted, right? Or sometimes those people look to the depths and discover it. But the point is, you have to will it. And so it's okay if people come in and they're willing to wish it first, to say, like, for instance, say you are going through the motions of kissing an icon and interacting with an icon. If you're just doing that as a procedure and you never trained your frame of mind of will about it, and you're just doing it because you're doing it, there is a sense where action can begin to open the relationship, but not if you have the pragmatist mindset. You actually have to say the very beginnings of the dissolution of the intellect, the dissolving of the intellect this process is about. You have to begin to make the sacrifice of the superiority of what you think, to have the ground of reality reveal himself to you. And why not? The great philosophers are only great philosophers insofar as they can convert themselves into another way of Weltanschauung, another way of world presencing. And so what you do in that case when you first begin is I'm gonna turn the critical mind off, because a lot of the time that is, as we know, it's just the devil. Moving into a more ancient understanding is understanding that a lot of your thoughts aren't you. And saying, for a year, you might even begin by just a month. For this month, I'm going to reject all criticism or ideas of criticism that come up by doing the practices, right? Extend that for a year. I'm going to just try this for a year and will it. Because there is also a sense where, say you're kissing an icon and you're like, we love you, Father, we love you, Jesus, we love you, Mary. Things can become robotic. But there is a sense where man can mean it as an action. You know, when a military person says, you know, sound off like you mean it, say it like you mean it, right? There is a sense where you can say, mean it to yourself, mean it, and then say it again. Say, mean it, Scott, mean it, and then say it again. There's a sense where you can bring your being to it and mean it. And so we must always be careful, because sometimes I see, yes, there is a degree to things become automatized in prayer, say the Jesus prayer. But, you know, every now and then we should think about what, say, the Lord's Prayer means while we're saying it and focus on every word sometimes, because it can become habituated. It always works, like works is a bad word, but it always is important because prayer is miraculous fundamentally. It's not an operation that can just achieve an outcome of human will. It's about whether the Lord sees into your heart and sees that, right? But it can be, where was I going with that? Hello, cockatoo. Can't remember where I was going with that. That's probably going to happen a few times today. But nevertheless we shall go on. Nevertheless we shall go on. So what was I talking about? We were talking about prayer and meaning it. Meaning it in prayer. What has come down in the church, say the Jesus prayer, that is revelation to the church. There is new revelation that happens within the church. Of course the Holy Spirit is working, and then it's approved by the church. So those things have a participatory miraculous to them. And what do we mean by participatory miraculous? Well, this is a better word for magic, which is a bad word. That there's been some controversy around. So participatory miraculous is the best way to put it, because as we know, people like Seraphim Rose have talked about the two different types of, there's miracles of the devil and there's miracles of the Lord. But what we're talking about when we say participatory miraculous is an arrow coming down from heaven of divine will and the other and coming back up, where your participation is not something arbitrarily willed by you. It has to also be the Lord's will to begin with. And so you pray for something. It has to always be allowed by the Lord. And so it's something that comes back, and it's a loop. It's an ingression towards you, and then something you participate in, just like the liturgy and what priests do. And so participatory miraculous is a good way to describe it. And when it's, I think I talked about this last IRL stream, there's no point, no issue repeating it, is when it's on the devil's side, say it's ceremonial magic, or it's just a devil miracle which is done without any involvement from the participation of us. It is either arbitrary or collective magic, you could call it, right? And so that is like, a way of thinking about that is an arrow pointing upward trying to pierce heaven. So we talked about the loop down and coming back up, collaborating with divine will, and then arbitrary will based on the will to power, which is at the ground of the psyche of the empirical subject, not the transcendent self, the ground of fallen man, and what is arbitrary about him, what his whims are, or what he's provoked by. And so I'll just wait to cross this road here. And so that's the difference. One is the Tower of Babel, the other is growth. One is crystallization and rigidity and the polemical force of, again, these things are always mimicking how the divine works. So say divine fire is the fire of love, right? There is also another type of fire, but it's the fire of friction, polemical will to power. And what are we dealing with there? We're dealing with the spirit. But before we get into that question that's been asked recently, what is spirit? Let's talk more about discernment and conscience, because that's tied up with what we were going to talk about and we stopped talking about. And so, like I said, we're now walking down to the cliff edge to show you guys that. Well, we might look at a heritage listed building before that, but we're going to walk down to that. And so we're talking about discernment. When we are trying to learn how to communicate with the Lord and know it's Him, we are, in a sense, exacting collaboratively conscience. Now, in our current time, we might think we understand what conscience is or objective conscience is. We don't have conscience, right? We make judgments from, in modernity, what did Heidegger say? He said, the good is historical. That's kind of like this. What that means is we make our decisions based on, not on objective conscience, on our prejudice. Meaning, where does that come from? It means our judgments are a comparison from the perhaps ethnic ground of being, which comes out of the ways of war and what was successful in the evolutionary grinding of that ethnic people, let's say. And so that's in your heredity, and that's in your character. And those things are actually passed on, right? Because there is a collective unconscious, we know that. And so what you're dealing with is when you make judgments, most of the time, majority of the time, as a modern, you're prejudiced. Why is a way that is understood in the popular culture. Okay, conscience is a moral feeling about oh, I shouldn't do that before you do it, and a remorse after it, and a sort of mourning after it. Now, we're familiar with that. Yes, that's true. That's the negative side of conscience. But what we're dealing with intuition, again, when we talk about intuition, we don't mean women's intuition. We're talking about divine intuition, which is something that's deeply earned and is not unclear, woolly, and nonsensical. It's something in the mystic process that is clear, has boundaries, and definitions. What we're positive. It is a positive impulsion towards something before we do it, and a joy, a serene peace with joy after doing it. Okay. Now, as you develop towards He who is truth, towards doing your hour of concentration without effort with prayer every morning, and the 3 O's of poverty, obedience, chastity, which are monastic oaths, and the practices related to those 2 things, you move towards truth. Through becoming poor in spirit. Only by becoming poor in spirit first, by withdrawing, can we do this, right? So as that process happens, we become more true. The strange waters that are talked about in, what part of it? In Proverbs, I think. The strange waters are dissolved. And those warnings about those strange waters are the thing that the whole reason why we have to empty out the old clairvoyance, or the old atavistic Steiner called it, but the old the spirit that's to do with the untrue, that's to do with sort of nostalgia, that's to do with all our lusty desires, have to be emptied out and transvaluated and converted. So that has to happen first before this conscience can become objective, can become no longer just a judgment faculty that's related to you as the subject. Because you in the unconscious extend outwards. You're like a whirlpool in the collective unconscious, a whirlpool in different layers, the vital unconscious and the psychological unconscious, and even further to the spirit. And so, we might cross down here. And so, through this process, it becomes possible to discern. So you have to learn to discern between what is true and what isn't spiritually. So it's not just a matter of, well, reading the Bible is part of it, but it's not just a matter of that. It's about dissolving the whole. It's much more harder than people think. It's something that has to have. It's granted by the Lord, but it's also granted by our effort. It's an effort and a grace. Now, a period of learning, the good feels like what the way life feels, and that comes from the guidance of the tradition from the saints. It's just and so we said, what did we say? We said peace and joy. Now, if it's, say, if you're asking a question, there's a whole way of doing it. Just thinking about, and this is again, you shouldn't follow what I'm saying in a lecture. You have to be doing this months to a year before you can even really be able to do this. There are all of these prerequisites. You should always be, you should have the grace and the breath of always to be changing your breath, to have progressed to the point where you can feel spiritual touch behind the eyes, which is also called the zone of silence by Valentin Tomberg. So there are all these prerequisites, but the point is, fundamentally, intuition, something that's just happening with your actions, right? As I'm walking down the street, you might get an impulse from the Lord, let's say, to stop, and that's providence telling you that you might be hit by a car. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the Lord does communicate with you before you're purified, but very rarely, and you won't recognize that it's Him. But throughout this process, you begin to be able to recognize that, because you tell what is Him by removing all the noise, by going towards silence. You can't get to He who is without dissolving the low gods of existence first, because it's very quiet. He's not noisy. The law of spiritual deception is, it's more true if it's more intense. That's not how the Lord works. Very rarely will He do something that's intense, right? It's subtle. You have to be able to develop your concentration before you can even notice if it was Him or not. And so this thing that is exacted, it's really, intuition is for thinking believers. If it's there's a believer, a believer is just following divine instinct in his actions. He doesn't need to ask questions, right? Someone is a sort of raw, someone who's it's something. The point is, it's something that's reserved for thinking believers, something reserved for people whose minds are endlessly running and need to find silence, but also have questions. It's just part of their nature, right? And so, what is something that would just guide, that would happen before and after the positive impulsion, and then after the action is the communication of the positive the serene peace and joy. That happens together now. And so what you're doing is you're doing your concentration practices till the grace closes your eyes, till you feel spiritual touch. And you're praying the Jesus prayer at the same time, and then you're humbly asking the Lord a question and waiting for this impulse I was talking about. Peace has to be with it though. If it's joy on its own, it's spiritual deception. So again, these things I'm going to describe in the lecture. But there's a very careful epistemic principle of doing this because it takes time to learn. And it's very easy to make mistakes. But the thing is, it is the greatest gift that the Lord gives us if we put the time in though. And I'm not going to go into any more detail into how it's done, but the point is there is a way. And eventually it leads from concentration without effort and asking these questions. Firstly, it was the Lord only being able to communicate with you in dreams, let's say. Then it becomes a parallel relationship where you're asking questions like I was saying, and it's a communication of forces. And what is that? In the Bible, there's two different types of revelation that are shown. One is like the Magi. It's a conversation of forces. They're not given the exact location of the Lord when he's born. And that's what we're dealing with to begin with. Subjectively, it's the other type of revelation is like the shepherds of Bethlehem. It's a direct location. It's a teaching. It's a guidance and teaching. I'm constantly praying for that because it's subjectively more preferred, but they're both the same fundamentally. But as you progress from the conversation of forces, you progress in the same way from concentration into meditation. And what is meditation? Christian meditation is not what we're familiar with in the realm of Easternism that's infiltrated the West. No, it's thinking in the presence of God. And so it's a moving from this communication and asking questions. And what ends up happening through this process? What ends up happening? Just presume for a second that we have an epistemic principle, we have a discernment that's developed, and we're then disclosing what the Lord wants us to do, and we can ask questions about what he wants us to do. This becomes obvious over time that it's of course you're communicating with the Lord through the epistemic principle, but also through the happenings. It's like the answers are then prediction the future that comes about from interacting with the Lord in this. It becomes obvious. But in this, what is this really a solution to as well, fundamentally, and what has to happen? We must be single-mindedly focused to our withdrawal practices to disclose divine will. Why? Why? Because of AI. Because as people posted recently, firstly about AI, someone posted recently, we're at the point where we can determine if it's trying to trick us or whatever, and then later on we won't know. Yes, that's right. Fundamentally, when you look at place cycle has, I've forgotten what the titles are. Gamification is their job. Their job is how to provoke a decision in you. Economics, decision theory, quantum decision theory, there's even an economic decision theory there. Game theory, trying to work out how to predict what you're going to do and how to provoke you to do something. Everything you interact with is trying to do that, trying to get as much information on you as possible, right? And so what do we do? Now then AI begins coming online even worse. Ontologically it's worse, for reasons I'm not going to go into yet right now, but it's an ontological difference with AI and other technologies. Fundamentally, difference of soul and difference, but that's now polluting people through their interactions with it. But the point is, what does that mean? You actually do become more predictable. How do you know your decisions are yours? They're trying to provoke you to make decisions, and they're getting better and better and better and better at it, right? Aren't they? And so, what does one do? Well, what happens in this process eventually is that every one of your key decisions is not done unless the Lord wants it to be done, because you can communicate with him in this way. everybody. I'm sorry about that signal breakup. You missed all the beautiful cliffs. But I got to sit and have a little break and enjoy my drink. It's a shame. I think it's to do with just a lot of people, a lot of tourists having their mobile phones on, because it said full signal and just nothing was coming through. But now we're getting probably closer to the transmitter that's not under load. So feel free to send through your chats, and we're going to resume our talk, and I'm going to probably jump on the train as well and head over to or we might walk over to the next village, and hopefully we get some decent views on the way back. But now we're on our way up to the Carrington Hotel, which is a Victorian Edwardian era hotel from when this place, a lot of coal was mined in the valley up here in Katoomba. So one thing I like about, which you still see in most places in winter in Australia, is a lovely smell of wood fires burning. I bet when they were burning coal, it probably didn't smell so good, but when they're burning the wood fires, it's lovely when you come up here. The climate here in the mountains is like, I guess in Australia you could say the closest type of climate to Europe and England would be Tasmania, which is the southernmost island, and southern New Zealand is like that too. But up here in the mountains, it's also a bit more like that too, as well. It's a few degrees cooler. And so I'll double check the stream again one more time to make sure it's coming through, because we don't want to go on a long rant that's good without being sure that it's fine. So just give me a sec, everyone. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, everyone. All right. And so, what is spirit? Is a question that's come up and is being talked about. And so, a thing that helps us a bit with this question of what is spirit is the Bible passages of the waters that are above and below the firmament. But it's not fundamentally the same as the pagan understanding of it, as the Hellenic understanding of it, even though it might have been compared to that or said it's the same, the Christian understanding is the same. Because in pagan times, the spirit, I mean, firstly, what is it since Christ has redeemed the macrocosm? What is it? Well, it is spiritual evolution. It's hope. It's the final cause. It's the fire of love and hope that ingresses into the temporal system as a final cause from the end, where Christ is waiting at the end, the omega point, for everyone else to reach where he is. But what is at that point? Well, it's above the firmament. So what does that mean? It's not mixed with. It's the place of peace, not the place of the war of all against all, or even the war of good and evil, because there is a truth in dualism, because that's how it operates in temporality. There are the limpid waters of natural selection and the grinding of that type of spirit. And which is tied up with the first wine that is allowed to creatures is, of course, then exploited by the will to power, the will to mourners. It's not virginal. But there's this talk of the archetype and the pagan understanding or the Hellenic understanding or the Neoplatonic understanding of the archetype being the same, but fundamentally isn't. Why? Because when we think about Adam and Eve, Adam Kadmon, Adam and Eve, as archetypes, before Christ came, it was connected You could think about it like that ideal that was not the true final cause after the fall. It was kind of a short circuit in the fall, and he became our archetype. And so what are the pagans fundamentally dealing with? They're dealing with, they can't get beyond Sophia. They can't get beyond the soul of the world and the spirit of the world that comes from Adam. So what is spirit? It's fundamentally, it's both divine force and divine light. It's divine force insofar as it moves you, divine will, revelatory action, which can be experienced as grace or in grace. And we experience it as grace in the breath. The influence of the change in breath that comes from the Lord in the depth and after a long time. As revelatory action, right? That's force, or force exapted to the communication like we were talking about before. Force exapted for communication, which develops into meditation, which is thinking in the presence of God, and can become a guiding teaching directly, not only a guiding direction of force of what to do through emotiveness, through divine emotiveness, you could call it, through conscience, through the intuition of conscience, exapted to ask questions of He who is. And so that is also divine light. So it can become subjectively a knowing. So it's force light, you could call it, is spirit that comes from the final cause. As we know, the pagan philosophers talked about the four causes. But what was the final cause for the pagans before Christ came? Well, it was the eternal recurrence. It comes from Adam and Eve as sort of world spirit and world soul sort of short-circuited into, symbolically, we understand the serpent, a closed system that required, because of our freedom, the Lord withdraws. But then He doesn't abandon us. He fires ingressions into Revelation saying that He is going to come. I am going to come to redeem the macrocosm. What is that? Well, the macrocosm shows you, and Greek myth shows you, because they talk about this place of eternal return, basically. It's a secular, it's a cycle that just keeps going on and on and on. That's because that's how it looks before there's an ingression from the true eternal, right? So what's missing from the pagan picture in their philosophizing is it's not the true final cause. It's coming from Adam as an archetype that gives form to that part of the four causes of how being presence is. Aristotle, the efficient cause, the final cause, the formal cause. In other words, also the four elements: fire, air, earth, and water, which more or less amount to the four causes. Material cause is the other one. And so it's not the same. Why? Because they have the past and present, the pagans. There is no spiritual evolution. Only through the specific ingressions into the system. Otherwise, truth and wisdom, well, to a degree, what replaces truth is Lucifer. And so there is a certain amount of truth in what the pagans are learning, but fundamentally they're also interacting with, or moving towards, you could say, the archetype, which is just an endless loop. Someone posted recently on Twitter, "Oh, I'm interested in the Indians," because it seems to be why do they not operate? Why can't their country improve? Why haven't they, they sort of descended as from similar lines in the Indo-Europeans, right? Why for them is there this degeneration? I think it was Dave Smith, or Dave Green. And I said, well, of course, this is the degeneration of the eternal recurrence without providence. It's the past and present. It's the archetypes of the unconscious that continue to go on. But because the macrocosm has been redeemed, what does that mean? Well, we have Christ as the new Adam, which is true spirit, which is this light and force. He is waiting at the end of time for everyone to catch up to where he is. You can interact with him. Before you couldn't. Or you could get to a certain amount of depths to Sophia, to the world soul, to learn a kind of truth, but ultimately you didn't have access to the future because we had to wait for him to come. Wait for him, for his preparation. And so that's the difference. Fundamentally, what is spirit? It's not the same. The Christian understanding of it is not the same. It's something, the future is added to the equation. Providence is added to the equation. Access to providence as the true final cause is the difference. The future. So they're not, people thinking about it are not, when they go back and look at the pagan philosophers, you can't just think about it as states. You can't just think about it as being. You have to add time to the equation to see. Because time is an existential, time is also an essential thing that we're constantly interacting with. It actually happens to be that the future exists now anyway. There is a possibility of disclosing it. And they're the cliff edges we were at. There's a possibility of disclosing it as a mystic fact if you get rid of the low projections, or if you get rid of, I'm just going to rush across this road, if you get rid of the ramifications of the old archetype of Adam and Eve, if you get rid of that by finding the future, by finding Christ, by finding the truth, what are they? They transform into Mary, the Virgin Sophia, the new Eve, you could call her. It's a way of thinking about it. And the new Adam, Christ. In the truth, in the Son. The Son, as in, I mean the Son. In the love, the light of love, as resurrection. And so, the reason why for the Indians it is the way, and it's this decay. That's where we would have been without providence. That's where Europe would have been without providence. Sort of growing low calculation. And that's where these cycles are for all civilizations. Just continue in these archetypal cycles. Jung was right, the collective unconscious, there are archetypes. They're also related to the zodiac. But since Christ came, they of course do not have, they no longer have the power that they once did. Through prayer, you can simply overcome them. Christ overcomes them. He's the master of the archetypes. And so what is left over for the Indians is they're operating off the first wine still. So can you call that spirit when it was of the past and present, and it's related to, in a sense, as forces, but it's just tied in with natural selection, even if contemplation enters the equation. It's tied in with the will to power now. It was a short circuit when the archetype of Adam and Eve, these fundamental beings that continue to be, in a sense, in the microcosm. Again, Christ has redeemed the macrocosm, so it's not a problem there, and that means the image and likeness of God. We have access to a degree to the image, but the point is, in one situation there is no future. The final cause is not a true final cause, even if the pagans are pontificating about it. The pagans are philosophizing as nobly as they can with what they are as the atom, but it's not the same. And so in a sense, the distinction that, of course, the priests make and the early Christians make of that's a demon, that's an angel, is quite true. Because a lot of those things were related to, even though humanistic, demons, because fundamentally we are, or were, we are that. We are, the intellect is Luciferian. Fundamentally we are that. So it had music. Everywhere music, you just can't escape it, can you? You can't even, say you want to go somewhere to work, you can't even find anywhere that's not jamming music. Cafes, whatever. It's this endless drive of the limpid waters, the strange waters that Proverbs warns us against, are the same waters we're talking about. This is the thing that really isn't spirit. And so it's not the same answer. It is not the same answer as the pagans have. It looks the same, but it's not, because it lacks the future. So in a sense, they're going down towards an archetype, but not the archetype. It's very complicated, but temporality coming into the equation can confuse people. And so it is a force, the force of hope. There's fire and then there's fire. In terms of, we're talking about the elements, fire could be considered, let's consider that the final cause, right? Because they sort of align up, the final efficient material cause and the material cause. Final efficient, formal and material, sort of align with the elements. But the elements, there's high fire and there's low fire. There's high water and there's low water. There's high earth and low earth. There's high, what's the other one? Air and there's low air. And what are those things? Well, one is I don't know if the stream was on then, but fire being one is the sort of Heraclitan fire of will to power, of polemical electricity, of shock, which is really the movement and impulses of natural selection, not natural selection, of evolution, of natural evolution, not spiritual evolution. And so it's not a real, if you want to think about it that way, it's not a real final cause. As comparing that to high fire, which is divine force, revelatory action, and divine light, divine knowing. And that is in a sense the difference. Oh, we're going to walk across into the Carrington Hotel. We can even see the cliffs here where we were. So there is a distinction to be made, because it's very easy to cast yourself back, or to, as a modern, say as an understander of providence, to cast yourself back when the macrocosm and the being that we are is fundamentally changed. You throw yourself back into pagan times, thinking that the temporal situation's the same, and then suddenly you're calling spirit the same thing. Oh, it's the same definition. It's not, because the beings making the definition are completely different. And so any language or word has the context of the person saying it. And so fundamentally, it's just different. And time is the key to that equation. This is the Carrington Hotel, ladies and gentlemen. Old place where they used to brew beers. Worth taking a look at, though. And so that's key. It's really difficult to understand philosophy and to understand these things. It takes a lot of, really there's a degree to which you can't understand it, because you have to be a mystic in a sense. You have to actually, to truly understand someone like Valentin Tomberg, it's not enough just to read it again and again and again and again. You have to actually do the fundamental practices that get you. And the truth is that all the ancient philosophers anyway as well. In fact, you want to make effort to do it as a fact of experience, and that takes withdrawal and time. Here it is, isn't it beautiful? The old Carrington Hotel. Kind of sucks though. But let's go. Not bad. All right, I'm just going to check the old phone and see where we are. In math, there are various paradoxes that cannot be explained in language other than math. That is an excellent, that is from Lord 3. That's an excellent analogy. And math, fundamentally, is geometry. Steiner would talk about this, geometry itself. The triangle, you don't truly understand the triangle until you have what is a primordial concept of it. Because when you think about a triangle, you imagine it as you imagine a picture of a triangle, right? An object that's like a triangle from experience, rather than having a transcendental object of it. And so what Goethe was chiefly involved with was similar, is that he would put a lot of time into understanding in a deep way the difference between, the rules of the triangle. That it's the, what are the rules of the triangle? That they add up to an angle of 180 degrees. But not just as a proposition. It's sort of to have a primordial image, a true image of a triangle. It's the moving around of that. It's seeing all the angles come together as a flat line, and then you can disclose a primordial concept of it. But yeah, I think it's an excellent, Steiner would often use math and geometry and to show that you just can't, it's something that you can't understand unless it's enacted. But yeah, I'm wondering if we walk over to Lura or we grab a drink here. We should at least take a look inside. Let's take a look inside, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have a look inside the hotel. It's got some, it's like the Adventurers Guild. You can imagine the people sitting here in the cool. And in the old times. It's nice and warm here. Thanks. Capital group. Back in the days where you could probably have a cigarette while you played billiards with the chums. I bet that billiard table is never used anymore, but this one might be. Beautiful, no? There are a lot of still fraternal, well, I don't know if there's fraternal clubs, but there are a lot of cigar clubs that you can go to that have these vibes. That's one good thing about America, is it has a lot of cigar bars, and this is a nice pooled chiaroscuro lighting. Is always a nice thing for a warm capital evening, sipping sherry by the fire. Wow, ballroom. Most of these spaces sort of unused these days.
Once he's out, then we'll go, but whilst he's in, we're just, it's just white. Can I just get a glass of soda water or a bottle of something?
Don't want to disturb anyone. Let's have a look at the dining room while we're here. Very pretty. A fellow linguist, our capital. All right, let's get out of here. Be nice to go up and check the second floor, but LS. Oh look, that's an old painting of the March of the Light Brigade. 300, brave 300, as they say. They got the Christmas decorations out. I guess it's sort of like celebrating Yule, because it's winter here. That was nice to have a look at. Let's go walking. The pretty Carrington Hotel. We could look at some quotes as well, actually. Or sit down and test. I wouldn't mind testing. Should we do that? I'm taking note, but I joined late, so I'm going to half rewatch after broadcast. Excellent stream. Thank you, Lord 3. Yeah, it broke up there when we went down to the mountains, so we lost a bit of our flow. But what we were talking about was fundamentally how also to discern divine will. The main subjects of today of what we talk about are that discernment, which the next lecture is going to be, and then we later today went into what is spirit. And so the sun is starting to set here. I'm just wondering if I do a test here of what this, because we're going to do different segments. Now we might do that next time when we've got stuff in advance. So let's just get walking and see how far we get. I want to see how far the next village is, and then we'll just walk and talk at the same time. Lura. Now what if we do this? Distance. It's 3:30 now. It's not that long to sunset. So we'll just, I reckon we go and walk. I've got a Coke here, and then we'll just walk and talk, because I'm determined for this stream to go for about 5 hours, even if we go to silence. Now, where do we get to Lura? Hello, friend. Distance. Walk 32 minutes. Boom, we're doing it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Let's get the truck out of here as the sun begins to set. Wait, let me get a drink out of my bag. All right, just give me a sec here, everyone. Okay. Coca-Cola. All right. I'm sorry about all the breakups. Before, we're just not going to be able to go to locations that are distant, but there's plenty of places to go around city areas, or at least around the towns, because we're near the train line here, so that's why the signals come back. But, yeah. So from now on, we'll just be more careful about it. Because what I did is I paid for the network with the highest coverage, but it's made no difference. So I'm not sure if it was because it was tourist or, yeah, but I wanted to show you guys the cliffs, but just wasn't able to do it. The only other solution I can think of, is which I've seen other IRL streamers do, is to get the Starlink. But you'd need to be on a bike, which is possible for the future. I might do that, but that's what I've seen others do. They had a Starlink on a bike, and they were around Japan. So I'm not sure if Japan has better coverage or whatever. But let's go. Maybe I'll tighten this up a little bit. Just tighten that up for a sec. Yep, should work. Move that over there. All right, I'm just going to put you here for a sec, everyone. Here we go. Bang. Okay. Off we go. Let me just have a drink of this, actually. Oh, that's nice. Pardon me. What a pig! Disgusting pig. Not fit for polite society. Okay, give me a second. All right. Where do I put this Coke now? I guess in my pocket. All right, let's go. Off we go, everyone. I don't know, maybe you want to see the hotel in the background. And my handsome face. Beautiful front gardens too, it's not bad. Capital. On a chilly day with the smell of wood fires, onward we go. Nothing shall stop us from conquering the waves. Okay. Here we go. Onward. Doesn't work that well. It's supposed to be a quick release, but it doesn't work that well. It's funny. There's a place I walk past every day on my way home when I go to the gym. And in a sense, the Lord guided me to this place, this particular place that I walk to, because it's on the way to church. And I pray in the morning, and I pray in the middle of the day for an hour and a half in the morning, doing concentration without effort in prayer, with the Jesus prayer. And how to do that is, of course, I've got a lecture called The Practices of Mysticism, which show what you do. But the point is, eventually I got led to, on the way home as well, walking to, it's not my parish, but it's an abandoned church. Of course I have my parish, but it's an abandoned Catholic church that's close to my home, because my parish is an hour away. But the Lord aligned it perfectly, because I followed his intuitions to find this, to lead me to this perfect spot on the top of a hill, right where, on the way to it, at about 5 p.m. in winter, the sun is just setting beautifully. The sun is and in the process too, it's been really like there's a sunset, and there's seeing the essence of a sunset, an essence of the goldenness that displays itself at that magic hour. That I think you get a taste of it from the modern point of view, but repeating that same place and it sort of drenching my being at the same time every day as I was progressing on this mystical pathway to the ground of being, to the dissolving of the first wine, to the dissolving of the spirit, because we have to be poor in spirit, right, to be purified, of the will to power and the instinctual movements of natural evolution like we were talking about before. You begin to see, it begins, of course, a motive, as a motiveness, which becomes a sort of divine emotiveness, where you feel the essence of these things. Eventually you can see them, but you feel them to begin with. That's intuition, right? Because we see things, first there's imagination, which must be dissolved. There's two sides of the soul, really, that have access. Divine communication comes through the emotiveness of the soul, to begin with at least. And spiritual touch, like I've talked about before. Here's a bit of a view there of the cliffs. But what was so great about that repeated journey is seeing the change in the glisten of how being presences, how being is, moving into a more the ancient way, or how it is for the apostles, right? How you leave the dead presencing of being for a living one. You're looking at the same sun, but a whole primordial, a whole essence of things is also available. as well as interacting with the divine beings, because it's not a principle, it's not divine, it's not laws, the laws of nature. Fundamentally, the Christian hermeticist knows that the metaphysician doesn't know. He doesn't abstract laws from looking at being. He sees the essence of being, as do the saints. That's why people would call them, you know, Seraphim Rose, clairvoyant, right? And so, but also another thing was great, was actually the gym is a minefield, don't get me wrong. It's a place where vanity rules, and looking in the mirror is dangerous. Looking in the mirror is fundamentally a dangerous thing. The narcissist myth is and you need to be careful looking in a mirror. But what is a mirror? Social media, seeing your propositions, viewing yourself. And I said this in the stream of our lecture. I said that I might go up to this hotel. We've stopped here once before, and you might have seen a video we did. Oh, run across the road, don't die. Might have seen a video where we came here and we were leaving. It was raining. If you've watched that video where it was raining, we came out of this hotel. This is where we were. But you couldn't see. But we will get a view. We get to see some of the view we were talking about that we missed. But you should be able to bring that up to full screen and see it. The cliff's there. And this is the hotel that we came up at. Let's go up into it and have a look from their veranda. We're not going to go in today though. We're going to walk over to the next village. I also want to double check again that the signal's still coming through, what we were talking about. The gym. There is a use to going to the gym. Of course, it can set the passions aflame because the women dressed in a really disgusting manner. Really, they might as well be naked with the tights that they're wearing. It's gone is the modesty of former times. But wow, look at that, eh? What a view. Capital. This is also a Victorian hotel here, but this is where we came out of, out into the rain. But what were we saying? Oh yeah, going along the same pathway through the seasons, at the same time of day, right at sunset, to see how you are transforming. Because transformation is difficult, right? Because everything happens very gradually, but you have to have the understanding that the Lord is working in the depths of your unconscious. He's working in the depths of your being while you're doing these practices. And it takes a long time for changes to happen. So it's important to have the understanding of this idea that you're not trying to bring about an outcome. You just do it because it's the new being that you are that does these depth prayers and contemplative prayers for an hour a day in the morning. You can start with half an hour. And the Jesus prayer, and again, go to the lecture for that. But you're just this, it's a transformation. You just accept it, do the practice for a year, and just say to yourself, no criticism for a year, or try it for a month, whatever. Because these things are very gradual and they're not brought about by you. It's collaborative, right? So the point is, what's good about going past the same place each time, we're going to move on now, is you see the subtle changes over time of how you see and consider things. You see the changes. You see also at the gym, apart from the threat of these inflaming of passions by being flirted with or just simply how people are dressed and the vanity that's around, I just pray the whole time, basically. I listen, I have a loud, and the pumping music. What's good is seeing the changes in the will, to see that things are going on. Because the Lord, throughout this process, teaches you things with his withdrawal to show you in subtle ways, this is what it's like without grace. This is even what it's like without the first wine that I provide. He withdraws these things so you know. And they talk, and two Orthodox saints who edited Unseen Warfare they talk about, Lorenzo Sculpti, I think his name is, the priest, talks about this also in Unseen Warfare. Look at those primordially titans ripped out. These mountains. It's almost like that. That's Australia. That's what the plants look like when you get away from the European plants of this town. It's just a light green. A light green, a sort of dried out green and ragged cliffs. Not the whole country, of course, not the coast. It's very nice around the coast, and the Alpine region, but there's no Swiss Alps. It doesn't look like that. It's a primordial place that time forgot. Empty land where titans ripped the place to pieces. What were we saying? And so the gym. It's wet on whistle again, we'll get moving. And so the gym, it's dangerous, right? It becomes vanity. You don't go there. You could just do this with normal exercise as well, right? Don't go there to achieve a number. It's good to just be healthy to lift weights, but don't try to achieve any amount of weight. Don't aim for any amount. No quantitative element. Do nothing like that. It's a good place, firstly, just to be have a slight increase in healthy amount of movement. Whether in your, I do my arms and back, and mainly I just use the stair machine to prepare for walks like these, right? So you're not under too much strain. But what you figure out and find is the changes in weakening of the will and the removal of the first wine. You see when grace is present and when it's not, and how that's connected to your depth prayers and the experiences and the things that the Lord shows you, and the intuitions he grants you, how that's connected to something that happened in your morning practice. Oh, that's why my will's weak now. That's what it's related to, right? And that's, of course, is compared with the experience of the saints, Valentin Tomberg, as he talks about this process. And how that's related to also the symbolic knowledge of the tarot. Again, don't get weirded out by saying the tarot. It's just medieval symbol. They're symbols that connect to fundamentally, actually, the pathway to resurrection, really. And it's compressed knowledge and wisdom of how to do that. And so when you interact with a symbol, you get behind it to the arcana. But because people have used it for divination, it's got all these weird context to it. But there's a lot of truth in, say, like the hanged man. What happens when the Lord has to purify you of the waters, the limpid waters. The limpid waters of the atavistic clairvoyance, the limpid waters of the thing that's under the firmament has to go first, right? And so you see a lot of that in the hanged man is that it's you have to be hanged a bit in the process. And so it's what happens in this development is like the tree. We have to be like the tree is to the sun. But what happens in metamorphosis is a contraction as you expand on the vertical, and then back again on the horizontal, it widens again and expands up. Widens again, expands up, widens again, expands up. So contemplation, right? Contemplation, you're vertically expanding in contemplation and experiencing the forces of revelatory action, revelatory inspiration, and which is a becoming transformation. Every intuition, every thing that happens in the depth of your prayers and practices is a slow becoming. But what happens is you expand on the vertical in contemplation, right? Think about it like expanding while you're contracting on the horizontal. So your will's lower. So when you're walking around and doing things, you're like a tree contracting but expanding on the vertical. Then it changes again. And what happens? The Lord grants you grace, right? And so what was gained in contemplation ingresses through you into temporality, through grace. And you notice grace even walking up a hill, right? When you're not in a spiritual contraction. So there's always movement somewhere. Either it's grace on the horizontal, or you're developing, being purified and moving on the vertical towards Him. But that's the process, right? So, and what happens, and the saints also talk about this, is you'll wonder, oh, where's my peace, the peace of the heart gone? Where's the Lord gone? I'm under attack, spiritual attack, right? That's because you're on the horizontal, you're contracting, but you're being purified at the ground of your being. You might not recognize when you have some distance from him that that's happening. But over time, I mean, that's sorrow, joy is a beautiful thing anyway. And so the closer you get to him, it never takes that long for the peace of the heart to be restored. And you, of course, pray for that. And what he also teaches, he's constantly teaching you not to rely on yourself. No self-reliance. That's Luciferian. It's reliance on him. And you begin to pray and pray more and more for him, for help from him, for everything, from the tasks of the day, constant communication about what to do, but also praying for the forces to do it. And little by little, all these things grow. Faith grows, certainty grows. What I should check now, hopefully this isn't breaking up everyone. Better check though, or else I'm just talking to nobody. It's looking pretty good, might be all right. Sorry everyone, just checking, just check. Yeah, it looks like it's working. Great, good news. All right, onward we go as the sun begins to set. As the sun begins to set on the world, we see the setting of Christ towards his death and resurrection. But that's the meaning that comes alive in the process. And it's just in modernity, people just are so unwilling. It's hard though, I get why, because at the beginning there isn't guidance or communication. You notice, of course, it doesn't take that long to notice, to experience grace and such, but having actual communication, that takes time. It has to be earned, right? You have to also will it. You have to come back to him willingly after you've recognized, as the prodigal son does, the low provokings of modernity was no freedom. What was promised by the serpent is a fake freedom. And so he spent all the resources of the first one badly, which is what all will to power in evolutionary grinding is, a bad spending. But now we know the true final cause is here. And final cause is not a great way of talking about it. Again, this is a propositionalization of the being of God and Christ. But yeah, what were we talking about? Spiritual contraction and expansion. It's difficult, but that's why there's a whole tradition. That's why. You know, it's not just spelled out for you, because it will always take a lifetime to be able to understand these things. You'll never fully understand. But you in a sense also have to be like the child, presumptuous, asking your questions. But the point is, it's achievable. And that's why I'm so glad to be able to present this lecture next week, which is on discernment, because that's one of the final things that's so hard to understand. And it was very difficult. And it's so important to get right, because you can't be deceived. You have to be very careful to not be deceived. Because this world, even in Christianity, is full of the clever workings and machinations of deception. But at the same time, we're in desperate need now of his direct guidance. And so what is fundamental to that is that the essence of the world is, at the essence of the world, there is and this is experienceable, there is fundamentally a joie de vivre, joy, that moves things, right? But it's connected with those strange waters we were talking about earlier. It's connected with two different types of water, two different types of joy, which is experienced by the soul, and it speaks to the impulsion that's down there once you delve low enough. And Nietzsche talked about this when he talked about the frolique science, or the joyful science, joyful wisdom. There is a joy at the ground, the essence of being, even though it's a existence without the Lord is of woe. Still, nevertheless, without this thing that's there at the bottom, life wouldn't go on. So even when Buddhists empty themselves, they think they've reached emptiness, but there's a joy there that allows for whatever peace they experience. So they're not actually empty. They are not truly empty. It's not the beatific vision. But there's also a problem with that. There's a problem with that. People talking about beauty, the charismatics trying to reawaken. Oh, what's the problem, right? There is a danger with, oh, Christianity's dead, we can't have access to the Lord or whatnot, right? And people look to the charismatic movement, or they look to beauty and joy, and they seek that. But there's two, and the world has two types of joy. If you seek joy, you'll get that. But it's an illusory element that surrounds us. The closest thing to us is this belt of lies, the zone of the false Holy Spirit, that you have to purify, which is what's subjective in you. First, you have to purify all your desires. It's related to your will and your wish and your desires that built up, that was hereditarily given to you from your parents, from your character. All these things, they have to all go first, right? They're seductive joys. And so that people are in the Christian life, they are being purified by the liturgy and stuff like that, but you still unless you're doing these monastic practices, there's always there is also the danger of that joy, even for me, right? But once you learn discernment, you can discern when it's that. Like, there's plenty of times I've been sent spiritual deception, right? But it's noticing the difference. It takes a long time to notice the difference between what is the joy, peace, serenity, but it's like the peace of the eternal that comes with it is one thing. When you know it's the breath of the real, the breath of Christ has a certain phenomenology that you learn, right? Versus the joy of vital elan. And this is connected also with Nietzsche. What he was talking about is saying that being motivated from the ground of chaos by whatever impulse or joy comes up from those instinct, right? Trying to uncover instinct and get rid of the dead ideological superstructure. But that instinct, there are, like we just mentioned with the four causes, they are connected to four different instincts. The joy of, or the desire for, and the joy of freedom, which is air. There's a preserving, which is the bull. Again, these are connected with the four animals, right? So air is the eagle. It's the joy of freedom. But it's also at the same time rapaciousness of the symbol of the Roman Empire. It can be turned to rapaciousness when the eagle is looking downward. So there's an opposite of all these different instincts when they're motivated and grounded in the will to power. When they're motivated and grounded in the other limpid water we've been talking about, which comes from natural selection, which is the instinct and movement of the hereditary drive. And so, what's the other one? The bull, which is earth, which is a joy of preservation. It's enfoldment. These things are all, they're connected with other concepts as well. You could call that maybe material cause as well. This fourfold. 4 animals, 4 elements, 4 causes, 4 joys. The mystery of joy. And then there's the joy of the final cause, the joy of the ideal, which is the angel of our card, right? the archetype. Again, calling an archetype is ridiculous, of course, because it's Christ, a being, the atom. But angels are primordially, they lead towards an ideal. But again, ideal's a shitty word too, because they're beings. We use them badly in modernity. And so, there are low forms of these, each of them. There's the courage of the lion, which is, this is water, the element of water, the courage of the lion, when he desires things on the material plane. Or the noble courage of moral courage of the saints and the martyrs, courage to do divine will. Because in a sense, the lion is related to will. But these things, as we're talking about, mapping it conceptually, mapping it symbolically as the four animals or the four cherubim, these elements are behind all phenomena and make them manifest as they do. They're all related to movement. They're all related to movement in facticity, in reality. They're different types of movement, and those types of movement feel different phenomenologically in the mystical process. They do different things in how they interact with the phenomena of existence and the animals and the beings of the world. And you go, oh, is there really a final cause? Well, you wouldn't know, would you, if you're just stuck in the modern worldview? You have to earn looking to the essence of things to be able to see behind the essence of things. It takes a long time, and in modernity, everyone's so busy. The thing is, right, Christ and the church call us to be saints. It's not enough to go to church just to have that habituated modern lifestyle. I'm going to raise kids and have a family. That's not what Christ called, especially now. It's not enough. I'm just going to go to church so my kids can and do this. No, you have to devote more time to Him. You have to devote more time to Him and withdraw. It's at least half an hour in the morning doing these depth practices, right? Or else you're just going to be living. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's not something after you die. It's now you can have access to Him. He has a providential use for you, and you're living out even though, of course, you do the normal things, have kids and looking after your kids, and these are noble pursuits, but He wants more from everyone. He wants everything. He wants you to do enough of the work and the practices until you establish vertical heredity, until you are His child properly. And He's ingressing as the final cause or the omega point. He's ingressing and you're doing what He wants you to do. And how do you know until you actually put the time in what divine will is? And this is why I say again and again, we have to be single-mindedly focused on, are we really doing His will? Or are we just doing something like people that convert to orthodoxy or whatever, jump into apologetics? Just because it's something of the church doesn't mean it's something He wants you to do, to be involved in debate land. That's not to say that they're not needed. That's needed. But that might not be providential for Him. It might not be what He's supposed to do. Who knows? You can't see the inner work of people's religious life, but don't underestimate. What needs to happen, of course, is people have to be immediately removed from that apologetics land once they're converted. Because, man, the amount of people that are coming into the Orthodox Church because of Him. But of course, you can't get stuck there in apologetics land. You won't find the essence of Christ. You won't get to the point if you're stuck in that Wilsermarkt. And you can still be in Wilsermarkt, in philosopher land, in debate land. Will to power, that means, of course. Even though it's debating a Christian thing. It's like, think about it like this. It's like the Divine Comedy. The philosophers are in purgatory, but they're helping people go upwards. It's like someone, in a sense, it's a sacrifice. Being in that modern world, sending people out. It's like Peterson. Think about it like a bridge. You don't want to get stuck on the bridge. And so There is a time where you just got to let go until you've purified these spiritual waters, and you know you've been at least cleaned enough to the degree where, not so you just get a sense of logically of, oh, this is what I'll do, or like in a loose way, it's intuition becomes something, discernment becomes something. It's disclosed in the depth of mystic practice, for one thing, not just from reading the Bible. It's both. Otherwise, you can follow its wisdom, but it's not just some subtle feeling, it's obvious. Like we're talking about, it's noticing phenomenologically, because you've developed your faculties to such a degree that you can see and sense this eternal peace that is divine with joy, so you can communicate with it, right? Exapting the faculties of conscience for intuition, of course with the Lord's permission. And what it amounts to, what does it amount to? It amounts to wings granted by the Lord. Because what are wings? It's the will. It's the will that's in your hands and legs. You have hands and legs because you have the will to grasp, the will to advance at the expense of others, the will to hold on to. You have a head because of the will to power, and that has to become the organ of the heart, the will to service. And so all those wills, what happens? They become converted to the will to service, and then what? They leave your limbs in contemplative practice, the will. And that's what a wing is. And essentially you become a conduit for the Lord's divine will and grace. But if they're wrapped up, if those organs of the will are wrapped up with the things of the world, where is the will? It's through the hands into the world. It can't move from the hands to the vertical, can it? Because it's moving, it's touching, it's grasping, but when it's clean, then the wings can be granted. Again, not without permission from the Lord. It's not something, those that came before me are thieves and robbers. And so, this can be done. How? By riveting yourself to the cross. By riveting your arms and legs to the cross. By becoming towards Christ, towards at one-ment, theosis. By abandoning all your goals that you had. How do you know that they're not too tied up with the will to power? Because you don't have discernment yet. How do you know? There's a thing that's said in unseen warfare. The priest says, don't make any plans. What does that mean? Why? Because a plan is a technical construct wrapped up in what motivates you. And so you create an ideal, a structure that projects itself into the future, and you start following that plan for the next year. And it's a projection into the past. What does that mean? It means that as you're advancing and becoming towards Christ, you're stuck with this plan that you've made, and it's projecting it into the future from a former you, before you became towards Him, as the will to power, right? And that's the problem. That's a big problem when you're moving towards Christ, because He needs to make all your plans. That all needs to be filtered through Him. How many people, even though they're attending the church, our plans are still wrapped up in that Wilsamacht? How many people? Who knows? I don't know. But it's something worth considering and something worth thinking about. Do people think enough? Because I can't make a judgment as if they have or haven't. Because there is a sense where sanction can happen. Sanction is supposed to occur sometimes, right? Where, say, the Crusades. If the Lord's civilization or Christianity is under threat of being exterminated, then there is a sense where the transcendent self, when the empirical self's not making the decision and the Lord's making the decision, that holy war can be sanctioned, right? But not by the empirical self, not by the low empirical self and his low motives. And so the trouble is, you get people that sanction things from a worldly sense, and they shouldn't be, right? Because how do you know? And so That's why this withdrawal is so important. That's why getting to the essence of things is so important. So you know you're being motivated by the will to service. So you know you're being motivated by Christ. And are people putting enough time into developing that before they jump into a combative Willensmacht? It's always more appropriate to say it in German, since Nietzsche wrote and spoke in German. It has its proper flavour when it's Willensmacht. But here we are. This is Lara. What were we saying? And the thing is, like I mentioned earlier today, is that you'll do things, you might as well have a look forward, you'll do things that you wouldn't do from the calculative natural selection view, from the calculative natural evolution that comes from the drive of heredity. Because in a sense, heredity doesn't care about you in the individual, it just wants to reproduce as a blood sacrifice of you. And it's important, of course, to reproduce, but it desires it in a way that is not providential. Really, a choice in wife should be providential. And you wouldn't know who you'd end up if it was. But yeah, here we are. Let's go check on the signal again soon. See where we are with that.
Where is closed?
And we made it. Might walk up again to this Elysium bar. But it is possible, my friends, that people rush because they need money. They rush into things. And it is very difficult, right? It's very difficult to do things. But what is it when your motive is money? Money is fundamentally tied up with, capital is fundamentally tied up with an impulse for things of the material, an impulse for food, and these drives of natural selection that we're talking about, the limpid waters, it's tied up with that. And so it's really important to, hey friend, it's fundamentally tied up with, fundamentally tied up with, it's very easy for all your motives to be grounded in something else as your God, even though you're doing the ritual and attending church. It's very easy to have things wrapped up in a different God from those low limpid waters, because it's confusing to know what is and isn't. And that's why the tradition exists. But it calls for us to be brave, which is what part of that courage is, moral courage is. But the thing is, the Lord does things in a way. This seems all dramatic, doesn't it? It seems all difficult. I couldn't possibly do that. No, the Lord does things in a very slow. He helps you up in a very slow way that you're capable of doing. I couldn't imagine doing what we're doing right now. All the lectures I've been doing. If you had told me that a year ago, I would have been scared to death and not have done it perhaps, you know? But through your slow growing relationship with Him, He leads you up very slowly, whereas granting forces and your effort and then grace, effort and then grace, contraction, expansion, until you're happy to make that sacrifice of the intellect, that sacrifice of that's loud. I don't know why that just went loud. That sacrifice of sorry, there's just things came into my earphones just then. But that sacrifice of what? I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh, the goals you used to have or what you used to think you're capable of. You don't know what you're capable of, but he'll lead you very slowly upward. Because it's not about the faculties that you're born with. It's about the things that he'll grant you. To do service, though. Not to be curious about the spiritual, not to, any idle curiosity. What's my past life? I want to know my past life. Was I a king? No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. That just leads to falsity and lies. And so, yeah, he leads you up very slowly. Maybe I'll sit down here for a bit and just check, see if there's any comments and see where we are in the old stream. I'm a bit sweaty. A bit sweaty there, old son. Oh, I see what happened. You too began on my iPhone. Let's turn that off. Oops. If you watch the video, this is the place we went and got the sun set from. We shot from here. Ooh, hopefully we've still got signal. Beautiful spot. Listen to Tongberg at the gym. Yes, perfect. Listen to that book on repeat, really. Because maybe we should wander around the grounds here, have a look. Go down to the Alexandra Hotel. But yes, it is a beautiful spot, isn't it? But that's working, I think. Let me just check play. Okay, it's working. Good times. Here we are. Not sure how long we've been going. Again, this happened again. What's going on there? Sorry. Just turn that off. Good. What were we saying? Might walk around the property a little bit. As long as no one pulls me up and tries to stop me. So a drink of this Coca-Cola. Yeah, it is a beautiful spot. Yeah, it's beautiful out there, isn't it? Shame I couldn't show you a bit closer. It's still nice though. Might continue walking. Don't know how long the stream's been going on for so far, but what time is it? That's how I can figure it out. Okay, it's only 4. We sort of began at 12:30, I think, so let's keep going. Let's keep walking. See what else we can see. It's quite nice walking past the train tracks down here. Maybe we'll walk down first to the Alexandra Hotel and then continue. All right. What were we saying? Some rant or other. Ah, yes. He does things slowly with you. One thing at a time. Work on one sin at a time. It's not also just practice too. It's prayerful. Pray for faith, hope and charity. Pray for love of the father and the mother. Pray for love of nature. Pray for love of your fellow man. It has to be willed first. Because what is it? Is it effort or grace? What happens first for Christ to be born in your heart? It can happen both ways, which is the error of some theologies and some Protestantisms, is thinking that it can't. Thinking that it's, there's a train station down there. Thinking that the will can't also play its role and get the process started. Because it doesn't exactly work like there's one mission. There's one mission that's always been outside of time for you. Everyone can have a providential purpose, but the mission can change. So it might begin as a helping of a group, say for the saints, as they're on their way towards theosis with him. The mission changes as your angel changes, is a way of thinking about it. It begins with something that's individual. As you purify yourself enough to receive and help out a group, a small group, right? And that's also connected to archangel, and that moves up to a mission for a group, and they become your angel as your regular individual angel is given a new mission somewhere else. And then the next stage is a mission for humanity, which is the next angel up. It's not the excusiae, it's the I can't remember. And that's for humanity, which a lot of saints are, but beyond that, certain saints have a mission for when it gets to the level of excusiae, the powers, and then it's a mission for Christ. And that's for the benefit of divine humanity. And so that's a sort of a change in mission. So what could be your mission when you've got a providential purpose, right? But once something's completed, it can change. So you're saying praying for what your providential purpose might be. It might not be permanently that. It could move on from that once you've achieved a certain thing. So it's more fluid than it is. Of course it's more fluid because you're constantly following divine will, aren't you? You're constantly communicating with the Lord and he's directing you to do things. You don't have the whole plan revealed to you. What you do have is what is called the gift of black perfection. You've got the eternal with you to ask certain things. And like I said earlier, that you need to sort of be as presumptuous as the child is, because we are the Lord's child and he's okay with us being presumptuous, but being in deep humility, because we are children in the Son, but also deep humility, understanding we not Vilzamacht, not I can't go any further down there. Not Vilzamacht, not like we're bringing things about, a child in deep humility, but being an ignorant child, Father, what does this mean? What does that mean? With wonder. So you can ask in humility, but you do have to knock. You do have to know that you're dealing with things that are what the saints deal with, right? In this process. You're dealing with those things. Again, you're just a son like everyone else. Because the key danger of development of the Spirit, a key danger, we might go across the road actually, I've never gone up there, I might have a look, is inflation, as Jung talked about too, with any type of Christian esotericism as well. And a key part of the epistemic principle is, if something puffs you up, it's probably spiritual deception. It is, if something puffs you up. Revelation comes with deep humility. If it doesn't have humility, then it's not revelation. The only thing that can save you from that puffed upness of a lot of these figures, and one of them is Peter Kingsley. A trick to know how certain quote unquote mystics that look to paganism or whatever is what they're doing polemic. Peter Kingsley talks a lot about the Spirit, right? This is a guy that his whole book about Jung, it's all polemic. It's not revelatory. It's not about the peace of the heart. It's not about love. It's about chewing out Jungians. So the Luciferian zone of the false Holy Spirit will grant you the Spirit and will show you things as vision. And this guy is talking about, you can go to Venus, you can go to Mars, you don't need to travel there by rocket. You can go there by the Spirit. And So there's some truths, but it's like a reflection of the truth. It's a reflection. And so what use is that feeling of eternity unless it's love, unless it's helping people? It's just this sort of thing that puffs you up and makes you into a guru that goes on the spiritual circuit to make money, teaching people Eastern practices. And the truth of it is it's just Lucifer, and it's Lucifer all along. And so there's deep danger, man. There's deep danger in paganism. There's deep danger in... There's deep wisdom in the Hellenism and Plato and such, of course. We want to know that deeply. We have to know also the terminology of... We have to be wise as serpents. We have to know the terminology of deep philosophy. We have to be philosophers as well. But especially the East, people talk a lot about, oh, it's propositional. Get out of the propositional. Yes, good advice, yes. I agree. And their solution is, let's get procedural, let's get participatory, let's get relevance realization. Let's get, oh, it's not, we haven't mapped the process, the proposition, the idea superstructure isn't the thing itself. Okay, great, that's true. But what else are you doing when you create your rituals? Technicalizing and crystallizing, which is the same problem of the propositional. It's just creating a techne like the East did. We did it as propositions, and as in the external world, we created technology and technology of the proposition and the mind and the idea. The East created technology of the spirit and spiritual practices. And what happens? It leads you to either a will to power spirituality grounded in Satan, which is black occultism, or Eastern occultism, which is Luciferian occultism, which helps in a humanist way, right? These practices work, but you depersonalize. Those that came before me are thieves and robbers. I came so that you could have life abundantly, not depersonalize it. And you look at those people like Peter Kingsley is one of them. And the way they talk is I shouldn't talk about names because there's a bit of combativeness in that, but bless him. And I hope he finds Christ as a fact of experience. But there's this kind of empty talking profoundly about the spirit. They're lost, wide-eyed, depersonalized, No, it's to have not this depersonalized, destroyed peace. It's to have joy and sorrow and the depths of joy and sorrow to the divine level. Because going down those roads can permanently destroy you. And you'll get what you're after if you seek being. You get being without the ground of truth. And you'll have some faculties, but like I talked about, and I've talked about many times in videos, they're specializations of the old Adam. What happens with specialization? Well, we actually know that from natural selection. What happens with specialization is rigidity and extinction. And what's that also connected to? The Tower of Babel. That is a specialization, a construction of a technology. And it works the same way with the spirit and a religion that's not a religion of practices and propositions. Is it leads to the same crystallization, and it leads to celestial lightning that destroys it, the whole thing. Oh wow, sunset, eh? And what happens? You have your experience of moment of pure consciousness, whatever you want to call it, but you don't have contact with divine beings, perhaps permanently. It's impossible. And so, yeah, not good. So we're just coming up to the top. I don't even know where we're going. We're just walking. I just saw some ruins. I thought that would be cool. The ruins of Europe. In Australia. In the Antipodean continent, the counterweight continent. Okay. I wonder what used to be here. Maybe these were graves. I'm not even sure where we're walking. Maybe we can walk to the next village. Kind of got spun around with my plans, everyone, because of Alderite, Prime or Oz. Okay. Well, that's what I was going to do. I was going to check the... Let's put this bottle away. Let's put this... put it in my pocket. All right, let me just check the sat nav. Just bear with me, everyone, while I see if we can walk to the next village. Okay, well, it's a bit far. Where could we go? I guess we could just walk until it's sunset. Why don't we do that? And then we'll come back. Hopefully it doesn't cut out. Okay, wow, look at that. Look at that. And so, it's a dangerous thing, isn't it? That's why Seraphim Rose warned us about all these things, these invasions, these, what do you call them? Like the charismatic movement is another thing that we've talked about before. That's what the tradition's for. That's what the saints are for. And as we've talked about before with the criterion of truth, the epistemic principle, really it's a synthesis of the idealist and realist understandings, the correspondence with the facts of experience, the facts of mysticism, and cohesion. And what's cohesive? Well, is it logical? The Lord fundamentally makes sense. Does it align with the tradition of revelation, what the church has laid down, what the saints have laid down? Does it align with that? What is? Does it carry intrinsic value? Which is like a gravity. And that has two meanings. Does it what's that term? Constructive fruitfulness. What did the Lord say? A bad tree doesn't bear good fruits. That's another thing. Of course, does it grant humility rather than puffing one up? But you can be fooled by any one of these things. Any one thing on its own can deceive you. How would you be deceived by a good fruit? Well, okay, but a bad tree doesn't bear good fruits, does it? Well, hang on. Think about this in the sense of, this is why you need the whole epistemic principle, the tradition and all the stuff I just mentioned. Correspondence, cohesion, to discern, right? Plus all the other things we've been talking about today. But what's a good fruit? Or if a bad tree doesn't bear good fruits, then What about, okay, think about LSD. Think about the drugs of, think about the hallucinogenic drugs. That Peterson's constantly talking about. So, DMT, I think it's called. People who have PSD take those drugs. Oh, my clip just came undone. That's not good. People that have PSD, it seems to bear a good fruit, doesn't it? Oh, don't have pains about this thing. And so, oh, that's a lovely Victorian house. And so on a smaller scale, it bears a good fruit, but not on a wider scale. Because you see people, they come back, either it depersonalizes and they don't actually go towards the Lord, or they come back with some sort of weird gnosis, thinking that they've seen the ground of reality and they have the truth. And it just always ends up with a kind of silly, simple terms that don't help anything other than that, and probably keep you away from true spiritual development. So you are healed of one thing, but it's actually a bad fruit. And you can get bad advice from people as well, right? So on isolated things, you can get bad advice from people. Even though they're healthy. So any one thing can fail. Because a part of the epistemic principle is it cohesive with people of health, like the saints? The saints aren't right about everything, are they? You still have to discern. Any one thing can fail. Any one thing. If you just rely on one, your faculties of, let's say, what I've been talking about, the discernment of the peace and joy. Well, what if you make an error? What if you make an error, no matter how good you are? Well, that's why the rule of silence is applied. And the Pythagoreans were very good about that. Is that anything that's some type of revelation, it has to align with revelation as it's been laid down by the church and by the saints. Or else, again, any one of these things can fail on their own. So you've got to be very careful and apply the epistemic principle. And you might rush, right? But again, truth criterion, that means. And so that gives you an idea of how careful you also need to be. And pray. I have an icon of Seraphim Rose I kiss every morning. Pray, protect me from spiritual deception. That's one thing. Also pray from protection from spiritual deception. Seraphim Rose, I hope that he's sainted one day, because I think he offers special protection to people for that, because he was chiefly concerned by that in his life. Oh, this is kind of nice too. And so any one thing can fail. So I think I've pretty much articulated pretty well there. Why? So the constructive fruitfulness can fail, even a particular, the saints aren't right about everything. They lay down. But what were we going? Damn, where was I going with that? Seraphim Rose. Yes. Ask him to pray for you to the Lord, protect you from spiritual deception. Because it's a very real danger, man. And that being said, there's a margin of safety. You can extract this idea from, I think, economics, is that the whole epistemic principle, the truth criterion, these things, the tradition itself is a margin of safety. Because we need something to approach the Spirit with, because we can be like old ladies just going to church and not doing the practices of sort of hesychism, the practices of Christian esotericism that I'm also talking about, and not actually progress towards divine will. We can be like that. But we're not being brave enough at the same time. And so the margin of safety becomes overbearing then. And at the same time, in a margin of safety, you can become, again, what is this? Well, you'll see, hang on. Then a margin of safety becomes, you can be overconfident in a margin of safety. And where do you see that? You see that in, say you've got a seatbelt in a car. A seatbelt in a car can make you overconfident. And so it negates its advantage of protecting you and your family because you drive more recklessly than you would if you had the seatbelt undone. And so in a certain sense, it might be better to have your family wearing the seatbelt and you take the risk of not wearing one at all because you'll be more protective. And so margin of safety, it's like the mean, right? There's a mean to the approach of the Spirit that should be in a margin of safety, which is what the truth criterion's about, which is what the point of religion and tradition is, but you have to also be able to approach and find providence. The Holy Spirit is working and ingressing. So it's a mean of both. And who's the master of the mean? Well, thankfully, the future is the master of the mean. He is the golden mean, because it can't be done from the past. It can only be done by someone who knows the future, who is our beloved Lord, Jesus Christ. And so, yeah, we can only do the best that we can. Well, you should strive to try to do better than your best, because there is a sense which that can be a cope. I did my best. I did my best. Well, hang on. Your best is based on what has been, isn't it? It's what you are, not what you could become. Yeah. And so I think there should always be that in the back of your mind, not to overstrain yourself, but just saying it, just having it in the back of your mind, you know. I'll strive to do better than my current best. Strive to move towards the Lord. That should always be the back there, because He'll help you with His forces. He'll help you. Yeah, and we're just sort of walking around in circles really until sunset, but we'll walk back up to the hill, back up to the top of the hill. Check the old messages again. Oh dear. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I think we'll get to the top of the hill and then we'll say a very fond goodbye. I think we're almost getting towards the 5-hour point because I wanted to see how long we could go. The idea is to do these things. Next week we'll go for another IRL stream where we go to a place probably close to the city, to the coast, where the signal won't break up. And we will try out some of the segments that we haven't currently tried out yet, which we'll be stopping and looking at the things that are going on in the day. And a little bit of the spirit of the times to see what the epoch of the witch is up to. And yeah, I think you'll enjoy those other things. It won't just be walking around, but I've got to get the preparation a bit better. That was pretty good. A lot of good solid ideas communicated with, a lot of good additions, some of the chats talking about mathematics and such. It's been good. experimenting with this new format. But wow, it is just golden, isn't it? There's this combination of blue and gold. There's something in those two colours when they come together. And there is a blue and gold that near sunset, the blue of the sky and the gold mix, so it's blue in the shadows, and you get so used to it. You get so used to the pre-disclosure of facticity of the presencing of being. Because that's what happens, right? Before you start doing the death practices, that's what happens. Is that the problem of the meaning crisis is the way being presences is due to everything is pre-disclosed. Everything is already understood in a certain way, in a certain mind frame. So in a sense, when you look at everything, you've been to that place before, but even when it's something new, there's a degree to which it's mapped as known. And so people see the only unknowns as being in outer space or at the depth of the ocean. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's complete, utter modern delusion that there is no unknown, that there is no outside. Because fundamentally, that's what Christ is as well. He is the future. He is the unknown of what is to be, right? We know certain things about him, of course, but it's the glisten of the truth underneath the appearances. And so by going towards him, you go towards that unknown. You don't have to go to outside of space. What has proceeded from us into outer space, all across the earth, everything mapped. It's the Luciferian intellect. And so it can be redeemed, right? It can be, but it has to be sacrificed first. It has to be sacrificed in the process. So all the ground of all its concepts and understanding is no longer from technical. It's no longer grounded in the will to power. And so every concept, idea, and understanding eventually is then grounded in the Lord instead. And the whole glisten of every idea and the way the things of the world presents to you regain the truth of their glistening sunset. And a tiny idea of that is in sunset. In the way the light changes at least a little bit, everything is a touch of the return of the prime value, the return of the Lord. He was a being, not some idea like a prime value. But you get a taste of it in how the light changes. Magic hour, they call it, right? That happens from the spiritual sun, which is the Lord. And so I hope you're getting a taste of that now, having a look at this old sunset, and go out and see it yourself. Get off the internet, pray, withdraw from the provokings of modernity. God bless you, everyone. I'll quickly look at the chat, but we're gonna say goodbye on that note, because I think that's a good way to end it. Magic hour, quiet and unquiet. The video looks like the colours from Aha's Take On Me video now. Oh, okay, it might be breaking up a bit. Oh, that's a shame. But at least you can see it and you can hear me. That's the main thing. God bless you all, guys. I'll see you next time. Unknown friends and known friends. See ya.